What game is most synonymous with GameMaker? At this point, many massive indie titles have been developed with GameMaker, from Gunpoint to Hotline Miami, or maybe an iconic freeware title such as Sake Loose or Jumper. For me though, there's always been one game I've associated with the brand from the very beginning. It was on the homepage of the old gamemaker.nl site when I originally downloaded the program there, and it was on the Yoyogames site when that launched in 2007. For an entire generation of amateur game developers, the very first taste of what GameMaker could do was summed up in this one image. Hovendall Tactics was developed by Florissen sometime in 2003. I'll be honest, I've had a very hard time digging up any information at all on this game's development or release. Even the Yoyogames Sandbox had it uploaded under Anonymous when they launched in 2007. The earliest mention of the game I could find was when it was added to gamemaker.nl in late 2003, but beyond this, I cannot speak to where it was distributed or how it was made. The game begins in Graven Castle, where we begin with our character, Verlo, catching up with his childhood friend, Leon. Suddenly, a knight bursts in to alert our heroes that a riot is brewing in the streets, led by an organized gang. Our two aristocratic heroes dash off to deal with this unacceptable show of free speech. When they arrive on the scene of the riot, the sneering squire leader of the rebellion reveals that they are called the Red Banner, named after the blood of the nobility used to stain their battle standard. Are we sure I can't just join these guys instead? The rebel leader says that they will take Verlo and Leon's heads and deliver them to a Lord Thulvin, and the fight begins. The gameplay is turn-based tactical RPG fare, similar to Final Fantasy Tactics in a 2D environment. I think. I never played Final Fantasy Tactics. I was too busy as a kid playing good games, like Burger Bob 1.5. We control Verlo and most of the blue team ourselves, but Leon is controlled by the computer, though he fights for our side. The goals of the fights vary, but here we just have to defeat all enemy units while not letting Verlo die, and we can accomplish this by using the game's incredibly minimal yet effective two moves, those being move and fight. You can do these in any order, or choose to opt out of one and wait. This allows for a surprising variety of strategy to go into each turn, compounded by the variety of fighters we have. In the first challenge, we only control Squires and Verlo, who has the same movement speed but better HP and attack power. This first fight isn't trivial, but it's pretty easy once you figure out that the people you control are the ones jogging in place. After defeating the Red Banner fighters, Verlo wonders aloud if they're attempting a rebellion. Leon says that he's heard of this Lord Thulvin and that he used to lead a group of bandits. Since times are bad, they theorize that Thulvin is making a play for the throne, and Leon suggests Verlo check out an abandoned farm down south to speak to Geepaf, a former thief buddy of Thulvin's. Leon heads back to Graven to inform their superiors of the rebellion plans. At the thieves' hideout, Geepaf yells that they're not going quietly, and we enter the next fight. This time the goal is not to dispatch all enemies, but just to take down the leader. We are also given a couple of new unit types this time around. A scout, who has a great deal more movement speed, though slightly weaker attacks, and an archer, who is weak in constitution but has a powerful mid-range attack. By focusing all our attacks on Geepaf, we can finish this one pretty quickly, and under pressure, Geepaf protests that he hasn't heard from Thulvin in months. Verlo grudgingly believes him, and the group returns to Graven, having accomplished absolutely nothing, to see if Leon has gotten anywhere. At Graven, we talk to General Farless, who is not a thinly veiled allegory for the Iraq War-era military-industrial complex, and he tells Verlo that Leon has already left on another mission. General Donald Rumsfeld impresses the importance of destroying the plague of the Red Banner. Before Verlo can respond, an old man enters, and we find this is Archmage Zabald, who tells us that other malicious groups are taking advantage of the chaos created by the Red Banner in order to wreak havoc of their own. Zabald instructs us that the Mage Guild in Charleston is in danger, and we depart with several acolytes in order to reinforce the town. There we meet several enemy knights and artists. What? Knights and artists? What the hell? There we meet several knights and archers who are tasked with defeating the force. This time we have two wizards who are slow and weak but have a very powerful and long-range attack. My strategy here was to take down the knight first so he couldn't deal damage, then get the wizards in range to pound on the rest of the units. As we finish off the attacking force, a scout runs in to give a message to Verlo. Reading the message, Verlo is shaken and orders the group to move out at once. When asked what the letter says, he reveals it's from Leon, asking for a meeting, and urging Verlo to not reveal this to anybody. Okay. On the way to meet Leon, our group runs into an ambush, led by a man named Orwell. Orwell is disappointed that Verlo isn't who he's looking for and instructs his men to let the group go. Verlo, having a hunch, asks if Orwell's intended target was Leon, and an archer in the ambush party unintentionally confirms this, leading Verlo to initiate an attack. In this fight, we must defeat Orwell specifically, and we have a scout, an archer, 2 squires, and Verlo. The ambush is made up entirely of archers, including Orwell himself, and they are all positioned on the cliff at the start. I haven't mentioned this yet, but the enemy AI is programmed to focus on the leader of your team, in this case Verlo, if they can. Because of this, I let Verlo hang back a little bit while I send the rest of the squadron forwards, hoping to stay out of range of the cliffs for as long as possible. This fight actually took me a few attempts, but I was eventually able to take Orwell down. After the fight is over, Leon approaches from the shadows, apologizing that he wasn't able to help with the fight, but that Verlo is the only person he can trust right now. There is a traitor in Graven Castle. Someone is supporting the Red Banner from the inside. Leon instructs us to meet up with one of his spies, Rezine, to collect her information on Thulven that may lead to his location, and the location of the Red Banner HQ. Verlo and Leon wish each other luck and part ways. We cut to Utaho Pass, where Rezine has just been cornered by an enemy force. Suddenly, Verlo and his squad burst on the scene, and the fight begins with a single goal: protect Rezine. Rezine in this fight is CPU controlled, while we control Verlo's squad, who is equipped with 2 squires, an archer, and a wizard. The goal here is to defeat the enemy squad while protecting not only Verlo, but also Rezine. This is another challenging fight, mostly owing to Rezine running into battle despite her not having very many hit points, but with a bit of luck, we can defeat her pursuers. Rezine tells us where Lord Thulven and the Red Banner headquarters are, and we hurry to cut the snake off at the head, which this definitely is. In the forest near our destination, we encounter a last line of defense before Thulven's hideout. Here we have to defeat the guard leader, Ingra. This fight is pretty simple, and luckily there will be no consequences for it. After killing her, we finally approach the Red Banner's hideout and confront Thulven in a majestic dining room. Verlo offers to spare him if he reveals who is funding the rebellion, but Thulven refuses to surrender after learning of his sister Ingra's death. Ah, nuts. We begin the fight, again with the goal to kill the leader. Most of the enemies in this one have a limited range of movement, so it's pretty simple to complete as long as we keep our wizard and Verlo back. Finally, Thulven falls, lamenting he couldn't avenge Ingra's death. He had no useful information. Ruminating after the fight, Verlo realizes that the true leader of the Red Banner must be the traitor in the castle, not Lord What's-His-Name. The group hurries towards Graven to warn Leon, but we never make it. In Bedru Valley, we are accosted by Archmage Zabald. He accuses us of treason to the throne, pointing out our flagrant disregard of orders and the missing Captain Leon, and orders us to surrender. As Verlo protests his innocence, a chill runs down his spine. How did Zabald know to find them here anyway? How would he even know where the Red Banner headquarters was? Verlo accuses him of being the mole in the castle, and Zabald sneers that he will meet the same fate as Leon. Verlo has no time to question this, and the fight begins. Our usual squad, now including a knight, is squared against a huge team of enemy wizards. This fight is very difficult to win due to the long range of many of the enemy units and represents a major difficulty spike in the game, but luckily Zabald himself is relatively weak, so the tactic that eventually worked for me was to lure him to the front in order to take hits while ignoring the rest of the units as much as possible and trying to finish things quickly. After Zabald died, Verlo declares that he's coming for Leon, whom historians continue to insist was his best friend, and our party rushes to Graven Castle. We burst in to see Leon on the floor of the room we started out in. He is still alive, but in bad shape, and one of the scouts rushes him to get help as Verlo and a sparse team is left to defeat a large group of enemies. Luckily, the enemy army has no ranged units, so the trick here is to use our archer and wizard to chip away at enemy health from safe positions, and bottleneck them at the sides of the tables to prevent being swarmed. After defeating the enemy army, Verlo returns to a battered Leon. He says that the traitorous castle guards came for him because he knew too much, and tells Verlo to take down the person who's really behind the rebellion. I wonder if those reports of WMDs discovered in Red Banner HQ are a clue. It turns out it was General Military Industrial Complex, the one named character who we haven't fought and killed yet. Verlo vows to take him down and bring justice to the land, but Leon laments that Verlo is too naive before dying right there on the floor. Verlo just turns and walks away. We meet General Raytheon in the hallway outside and demand to know why he's undermining the kingdom. General Halliburton spits that he did this for the kingdom. Since the treaty, the economy has been failing and the country was stagnating without war. War fuels the economy, brings innovation and prosperity. The country needs war. It cannot exist without it. And if the country does not choose war, then he will bring it to them. General Lockheed-Martin brings out an army of knights, archers, scouts, and a wizard. We, on the other hand, have our typical lineup of one each: Wizard, Archer, Squire, Scout, and Knight. General Northrop-Grummon has like 500 hit points and hits very hard, so even if we can focus all our fire on him, it takes a lot of skill and more than a little luck to avoid getting wiped out before we can deal the necessary damage. Luckily, we can use Dick Cheney's aggressive tactics against him to lead him into a kettle and finally defeat him. He croaks out, "The country is doomed without me," and with that, the struggle is over. Later, at an unknown location, Verlo meets with Rezine. She reveals that he was blamed for the deaths of the Archmage, President George W. Bush Jr., and Leon as well. Verlo admits that he was naive to think he could take down the Red Banner and bring justice to its organizers single-handedly, but that he will prove his innocence someday. Rezine shakes her head. If the public knew that conspirators inside the castle were behind the Red Banner all along, the people would rise up against them, their faith in the throne shattered. This is what's best for Hovendall. I didn't deserve this fate. If you only expect to get what you deserve, you'll only be disappointed. Verlo refuses to accept this. He will continue to try and clear his name. Rezine says that they need to go. They will move somewhere new, to live on. The screen fades to black, and credits roll. Hovendall Tactics is a tight little game with great base mechanics. It does what it does quite well, and doesn't overstay its welcome. I think the difficulty curve of the levels is remarkably well managed, despite some of the later fights feeling a little bit luck-based, just depending on where the enemies decide to move this time. Still, all the classes have specific functions that work well, and I think the leader mechanic, where one unit cannot die but is also a very good fighter, adds a lot of strategic interest in terms of how to use him, and how much risk to take with him. The story works well as a framework for the game and delivers some good, if foreseeable, twists, as well as some solid emotional stakes. I find it kind of funny how the Red Banner are just automatically assumed to be the bad guys when it's implied that the populace has some pretty legitimate grievances, and the ending too assuming that the public knowing the truth and overthrowing the king would be an inherently bad thing. But whatever, not every game can be the Communist Manifesto for the PC. Of all the games you could encounter first when working with GameMaker, I think Hovendall Tactics is a great showcase of the program's strengths, with its half-ripped graphics, minimal but well-programmed mechanics, and engaging story. It served its role well as the first lighthouse for many a new GameMaker developer, and if you're interested in it even after having the whole thing spoiled, go and give it a download over on the Yoyogames Sandbox archive. The link is in the description. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.